So I'm glad to see a wonderful panel discussion over here. Again, a representation from leading institutions of the East and Central India. Let me introduce the next panel for the day, and we have the first name as Jyotsman Datta. He is the managing trustee from Assam Downtown University. Welcome, Jyotsman Datta, sir, in this panel. And now this is one of the very finest and very beautiful university in a beautiful city of Assam, the state capital Guwahati, and it is been known as one of the best university in Assam due to the quality of faculty and a world-class infrastructure which they have. The next panelist over here is Ms. Shakshi Agarwal. She is the executive director of Sage University. It's a beautiful city of Indore. Indore is again been known as the second financial, commercial capital of country after Mumbai. So thank you so much, Sakshi ji, joining in this session. We have Professor Dr. Ajay Kumar Singh, the Vice Chancellor of Sri Sri Ravi University. Thank you so much, Professor Ajay, for joining in this session, Sri Sri University. It is one of the finest and nice university of, the Eastern India, center of world-class education that blends the best of East and the best of West. That is how you name your institute as being emerging as one of the center of premier education in India. Nice to see you here. Dr. S.K. Somani is the Vice Chancellor of Midcap University. Now, so talking about Midcap University is again coming from a beautiful city of Indore. It has been a brand name in the arena of technical education. Thank you so much, Dr. Somani, for joining us over here. Professor B.S. Satya Narayanan, sir, the Vice Chancellor of C.V. Raman Global University. So my best wishes and congratulations, Narayanan, sir, for having this leadership role in this time. So C.V. Raman Global University is again emerging as one of the finest university in engineering and management institution located in Bhubaneswar, Odisha. Happy to see you, sir. And Mr. Meghdut Roy Chaudhary is the Director of Global Operations, Techno India University, again one of the good university, a private university based out in Kolkata. And this session is being moderated by Mr. Hemant Sahel, the founder and CEO of Colpole. Is a Bangalore-based headquartered educational technology company, which provides a comprehensive enterprise platform for the digital transformation of education institution. The Colpole platform offers ERP for administrations, learning management system with video conferencing integration, AI proctored examinations, workflow automations for contactless and paperless campus, and the campus social network for digital engagement. Mr. Sahel is a member of FICCI as EdTech Task Force. He has facilitated the Young Thought Leaders Award by CRISIL and a medal by the institutions of engineer. Without wasting much time, may I have Hemant Sahel over here to help us understand how Colpole and the deliberation which is going to happen can transform our business in days to come. Over to you, Hemant. Please unmute here.
Yeah, sorry. I think we need more intuitiveness in the systems going forward. So thank you, Chandan. Pleasure to be with you all. I think we are still waiting for one or two more our panelists to join. And at the risk of maybe repeating myself to Jyotishmanji and Professor Satyanarayananji, this is my first opportunity to interact with Professor Ajay Kumar Singh ji. I'll just quickly introduce the Colpole platform to the larger participants who are joining, and hopefully by then the others would have joined in, then we can start our conversation. So if you allow me, Chandran, I'm going to share my screen so that we can have a quick walk of the platform. And in the meanwhile, I think everyone would have joined. So I'll take less than 5 minutes to quickly introduce what we do at Colpole. So we're a digital campus on the cloud platform, which is being themed. The whole event that Asma helped us organize is themed around digital campus on the cloud. Colpole provides an AI-powered mobile-first platform, which is cloud-hosted, integrates with multiple other technologies, and make sure that the product's getting updated and upgraded at a very fast speed so that your needs and your new requirements are being met. The whole platform is divided into 4 core layers, which is a campus management ERP, digital classes and AI proctored examinations. All the stakeholders are connected to each other. So talking quickly about the management ERP side, it takes care of almost everything from an administration perspective in the campus: feedbacks, financial dues, student fees, student financial aid, the admissions, enrollment, placements and career services, and all the rest of the things. Which is very important today with the COVID era, the digital classes and AI proctored examinations. So we provide an end-to-end digital learning stack, which includes academic administration, learning management, and examinations in a single platform. So when we talk about academic administration, what's important is curriculum management, terms, course registration, timetabling, attendance with the NEP. A very engaging learning management system, which allows you to conduct classes either in a physical mode or a live online class mode or a asynchronous pre-recorded mode, and gives you rich options of assessments, whether it's assignments, quizzes, group projects, and others. And finally, helping you manage the examination. Any university would know how complex it is to conduct examinations, from the assessment schemas, scheduling, question paper creation to evaluations, and then a lot of those processes. And with the COVID, I think online tests are here to stay. So monitoring where manual intervention is least required, and conducting tests. So we just conducted tests for about 15,000 plus students in Maharashtra recently, which were completely AI proctored. And the workflow automation. So again, every institution has hundreds of workflows which are either happening through email, phone calls, in-person visits. So we automate every single workflow. So this is a workflow engine where you can have unlimited number of workflows being automated without any additional code or cost involved, where you can have request forms, you can track the progress, you can define which departments are involved at what level of these work. It comes with QR codes, so no contact, whether it is your security gates, your fees approvals, your on-duty approvals, transportation, several other things. Comes with feedback so that you can have your ISO certification compliances and other feedback reports available. With an in-app chat, you don't need to go and use your WhatsApp or email or phone for any communication between different administrators. Auto escalations, making sure there is accountability in the system. So we are very proud that at the moment across our partner institutions, we are automating about 1,000 plus workflows with this technology that we have built in, and completely customized and adapted to every institution's requirements. Very important from a communication collaboration. I think the previous panel was talking about why it is so important today to keep engaging your students. So making sure you are using a safe and private environment within the campus, within the university. You don't need to use any personal channels. So whether it is faculty mentor to student interactions, official notices, campus news and events, and also the feedbacks, how quickly and how regularly are you conducting feedbacks within the campus is extremely important, which we automate. And finally, while you use this platform, a lot of analytics get created. So we are very proud to work with some of the best universities in the country. We have just slowly started, implementing it at more and more campuses. So we are looking forward to working with far more number of institutions. In this year, we have almost doubled the number of institutions we work with. And what we see going forward, and setting the context for our panel today, is the levers to digital transformation, which are two. One is academic and other is the operational side. So on the academic, how do we create a collaborative experiential learning platform? How do we use technology for high quality assessments, which can be limited in a physical environment? How do we make sure that we regularly invest in faculty development so that the technologies can be adopted well? And finally, student feedback. Because at the moment, most of the universities only do at the end of the semester one feedback. And I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about analytics with Professor Satyanarayanan, who has a lot of views on how analytics can be leveraged. And on the operational side, how do you measure performance? How do you measure efficiency and utilization at every single point in the campus, whether it is your HR, finance, facilities management, procurement, and how do you automate these things by leveraging technology to create a very special experience? Because to remember is that today's generation, which is coming to our universities and colleges to study, is highly empowered by technology in their personal lives. They are booking tickets online, they're ordering food online, they're getting a cab online, they're in fact finding life partners online right now. How are we going to match that kind of personal experience that they have with the experience that they are going to have in the university? And technology is going to do two things going forward. I think it will help institutions cut down their costs substantially, so that they can be more affordable, and it will help create more value in admissions, placements, learning, and also the campus experience with the students on day-to-day basis. So with that, thank you to all my panelists and the participants for being patient enough for me to give a quick introduction to the Kolpul platform and setting the context. So with that, Chandan, are we going to wait for the others to join, or shall we start? Because I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, you may continue. We are having messages coming. They are in a meeting or maybe some event, so they will be dropping once they are free from their events.
Got it. Okay, great. So quickly, so then let me start, with this question. And okay, so I think we will not get too much into what our universities are using, because today now we are going to talk about what's at the future with technology, what's the digital campus that we can. So with that, let me ask, Jyotishmanji, a very straightforward question to you. Are you expecting to have fully online degrees going forward? So there are two questions there. One, there is already competition from a lot of private players who have started offering these. So it's a challenge also for our physical universities to continue to establish that value a physical campus would continue to offer. And in a way, if you start offering online degrees, then how do you justify physical programs? So what are your thoughts? What are you planning on a fully online degrees?
Sorry, Xen. I think our softwares need some more, as you mentioned, intuitive updates, more AI part. Good evening to all. As you mentioned, I think in one of these sessions before I had spoken, I think about 10 years later, I don't think any of the physical campuses will be competing with each other for students. We'll be competing with some website for students, perhaps, because students will start questioning, why should we actually take admission for a degree, which is going to be 3 years? I have to physically move to a campus and a hostel and spend X amount of money. I would do that only if I'm getting skills in return and a degree in return, because degree also has some value. But now you have all these websites, you can call them these edtech websites, which are actually offering a lot of these short-term programs. If I can actually learn the skills from these programs and I actually can become employable, do I really need to go to a campus and spend much more time and spend much more money, which will always be? These edtech platforms are not regulated and do not have constraints like we have. We can always teach in the ratio 1:20 or 1:30, 1:15, as it may be. But these edtech platforms are not governed by those issues. They are not even governed by those limitations, and their costings will be entirely different. So going forward, I think every university, if we need to survive, we have to adapt to some kind of digitizations in terms of even delivery. Yes, we understand we're governed by much more stronger regulations. That also impacts the costs. I'm not going to say an online delivery would always match up to a physical delivery, but this question will be posed by students. It's about us to face the reality of it, because I still believe private education and education is still costly, more or less, for most people in India. I'm not saying all. So somewhere this question will be asked by the students, that what will you give for the premium that you're charging vis-a-vis these edtech platforms? So it's us for the university to decide how much of adaptation we'll be doing. We'll be offering degrees, or some programs will be offering partially digitally, which will reduce the cost, add value. So I think these are the kind of brainstormings that every university needs to do. And it's coming for us. It's coming in the next 5 years or 15 years, I don't know. But that kind of revolution will definitely come. And
Are you planning to launch a fully online degree soon?
See, degree is not my decision. Degree, you understand how many regulation we have to do, but we already have a lot of short-term things that are going online. We had done it before. We're already doing that. We are launching more and more soon. Our concept is, say, all these, I don't know, say in someone called Upgrad, maybe they're doing 10,000 admissions in my state. Can we also offer certain knowledge? We already have. We have the faculty, but we are not even thinking about doing it because the concept didn't enter our head that we can do something like this. Can we have more delivery, more than the limitations of the classroom? So yes, we are working on some platforms, and I think every university is doing or will be doing in the future.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for your opening remarks. Quickly, going to Dr. Satyanarayana, while we say that yes, online degrees are going to be there, but there is a value which a physical campus offers, the kind of attitudinal personality development that happens. So do you see a future going forward where universities will say, hey, look, my academic delivery or the instructional part will continue to be online, where at least half or more part of my courses are going to be digital, and they will continue to be digital? There is definitely a effort involved in creating content going forward, because that's where most of the, I think, physical institutions are struggling, that they don't really have those kind of teams to create online content. They have everything else. They've got amazing teachers, but they don't know how to really create content that can be delivered online. And let's say that gets sorted either by the institutions or by the companies like us who come and provide tools. Do you think institutions would start focusing more on projects, more on campus events where students are actually going through that? And what are your plans? Are you planning to do something like that?
Well, thanks, Hemant, for first of all having me here. It's wonderful and nice to see you all again. I think we are absolutely sure that brick and mortar institutions will not go away. Because see, India is such a country. I mean, just to put up in perspective, if you're looking at, I'm now speaking from Odisha, 4.7 crore people, and of that, just about 3 crore have mobile connection. And if say, let us say 15 to 20% have double connection, you are ending up with just 50%. But then most of the children otherwise, I mean, the penetration is as low as 28% internet connectivity in the rural area. And also so many reports clearly say that schools or even colleges, people are sitting on treetops to get connection. So online is great, but we are seriously looking at education and value addition through education. And see, for example, I'm not both higher education or school education, I think it's equally applicable. Many schools miss children who are at home today, miss being in the school where it gives them a huge, unique environment. Therefore, especially experiential learning as a knowledge based, I mean, our new national education policy is calling for knowledge, skilling and knowledge coming together for innovation and entrepreneurship. And therefore, this skilling and experiential learning, I mean, cannot happen. We simply cannot wish away digitalization of education, leveraging education tech platforms. On one side, for those who can afford, it could be an introductory introduction, and in the next side, it could be a booster and an enabler, but it cannot be a be-all and end-all of education, especially in a country like India, where from the current 320 million, we are expecting 500 million to be in education, school and college put together. And for such numbers, I think, I mean, who have no exposure at all. I mean, how would I expose somebody to aeronautics or medical or physiotherapy? See, so many jobs are going to happen in physiotherapy and allied health sciences or nursing. They simply cannot happen with some virtual tool. Yeah, they are all great tools, some advanced domain and technology. And therefore, we are absolutely sure skilling with hands-on activity is critical, but the digitized platform is a huge enabler in, say, preparing for them or fine-tuning their skills, but they will have to. And so we are happy to add, for example, that we already have created 22 centers on skilling across the board, at least in engineering to food technology. And the level of aspects we have done, for example, we are happy to say maybe our student has won, I mean, say one of the only gold in world skills contest in Kazan last time. And literally most of the available skill students will be participating from, say, C.V. Raman University in China. So we believe skills and knowledge have to go hand in hand. Educational technology, and the only advantage of the current corona has been that faculty who were one of the biggest, I wouldn't say impediments, but who had difficulty in changing their mindset to adapt to some of them, are finally coming on board and realizing the advantage. See, we always had, I mean, ICT-enabled education, blended classrooms, flipped classrooms, along with the project mode education. All that was always there. But then the faculty somehow think that only writing on the board was the only way of, I mean, otherwise others was not teaching. But now I think the advantage is that the faculty are also on board and they're realizing, and as you rightly mentioned, to just enable them, we have created content enabling sort department now. So that, I mean, see, the presentation that they do is great. And above all, because the whole education itself is now lifelong learning. We are no more in the age of, just learning something and some information and plugging on lifelong. Things are changing. And as we know, the 21st century education definition is ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And therefore, we have created a lifelong education process. And as a first step, more than even digitalizing and delivering free online, we are offering free skill and online courses plus an added campus hands-on experience needed for our students. Earlier we were in engineering college. For the last 5 batches, we have already created a template that even they could come and free of cost learn some of this, so that they can leverage both the online and offline and even reskill themselves. Therefore, I am of an absolute belief that brick and mortar institutions are not going to go away, but technology is a key enabler. We cannot wish it away. We have to adapt it as much as possible, and people like you have to help us accelerate some of the process for that, for sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Savia here. Obviously, we have learned a lot from you in the past. And so my next question for opening remarks to Professor Ajay Kumar Singh ji, you have already adopted technology very well, online classes. I think the basics of adopting technology at institution is by now done, right? The adoption of online classes or online basic learning management systems for assignments, quizzes. I think most of the good institutions have already taken that journey by now. I would really love to learn from you. What are the areas that you see technology can further play a role in the teaching learning process beyond just conducting online classes and hosting content and basic assessments? What is the next few areas where you see technology can really go and create a big value?
Thank you very much. Namaste. Good evening to all of you. First of all, let me first thank Qualpol and all its founders and the main organizers for inviting me for this program. And it's a very topical thing, very contemporary thing in the field of education. When our Honorable Chief Minister in Odisha announced on 13th of March that there is a disaster now, disaster management is being implemented now, and there will be lockdown. So it was before the national lockdown actually. And we were holding meeting on the same day when it was happening in the assembly. We were holding meeting, if government takes this decision, then what we would be doing. So it was happening parallelly at 2 places, and by the time we were ending the meeting, we came to know that it has been announced in the assembly. Then we said, okay, now it is announced. Now whatever we were discussing is on the ground. So the future is now. What we were supposed to do in years and years, what Professor Satyanarayan ji was talking about, that faculty had a hitch or whatever reservations and so on and so forth. Now there was no option. So in the evening, we organized a training program for all the teachers that from Monday, that was Friday evening. So on Monday, you will all teach online and they all did it. So all the, hitches and hindrances is of mindset. And people want to continue to live in the comfort zone. They don't want to switch to the newer things, learn new things and all that. So when something like this happens, then they think, okay, now there is no choice, but we have to do it. So I think COVID-19 has played a very positive role in the field of putting people to face the challenges, accept technology, and this transformation, which would have taken years and years, has actually happened just like that in the month of March. Some universities, April, May, June, July, August, September, October also. Like I'm from University of Delhi, it took a lot of time because it's like, a huge university with a lot of people from all sides. So whatever you do, there will be a position in doing all that, So it's very difficult to lead such kind of universities and have consensus and, make people understand that this is the order of the day now. And we were fortunate in Sri University that everybody was in line with that thought, and we did all the examinations, also proctored examinations, declared the results in May, did the convocation also in September, started classes for the next session in July and all that. So from that perspective, we have this experience that it is doable. And if people have the willingness to do it, the desire to be on the top, they will face all the challenges. What Professor Satyanarayan ji was talking about, yes, there are people who may not have access. So what we said, and there is a video message on our website, that please don't move out from the house if you do not have internet connectivity. Don't appear for the exam. If you are finding it difficult, don't worry. We will hold the examination whenever it will open in the face-to-face mode and so on and so forth. So there is no discomfort to the students, and you will be surprised. More than 98.9% of the students actually appeared for the exam. So they somehow could manage while they were in their home that yes, we did not force them. We did not say it is a must for you to appear for the exam and all that. It was 10 minutes message video, because emails don't communicate that much. And the sentiments, the expression, the touch, emotional touch and all that, you can only, when you speak, you can send the message across actually. So I did not want any student to feel distressed in this syndrome that I may not be able to appear. Mera kya hoga? Mera back to nahi lag jayega and all that. We said no back, nothing like that. Feel free. आप कर सकते हो तो करो, नहीं कर सकते तो कोई बात नहीं. And the response was so great. So when you take people along in the journey of this transformation kind of a thing, then people, once it is coming from inside, that okay, I will try my best to do it, then the success is there. And the government of India is working to bring connectivity to the remotest of the areas and all that. All those efforts are going on. It will take time. What he has said, is true that not everybody is connected. There is a huge gap now also. But there are most of the people who are in universities like us, and they are able to do that. That's my statistics I'm sharing with you. I don't know how much of your question I have answered up till now. You can repeat if I missed some.
So my question was, okay, so first of all, I think a very valid point you made, that we also saw with like so many universities we work, the universities which gave freedom to their students on assessments, automatically students opted in, because I think that may be the characteristic of the generation we're talking also about, right? If you instruct them of something, they will rebel. You give them an option, they will accept. And that's something we saw as a big lesson, that universities which were creating more flexibility were finding more acceptance from the students. In universities which were trying to force, students were making, bad comments in the social media about things. So that absolutely a big lesson on adopting technology, that the generation of the students who are coming in love technology, right? So they are fine with it, but the way we introduce it to them is something that really needs. So my question to you was, now that you've taken that journey of online classes, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or Google Class, or whatever tools being used, assessment, online exam, proctored, what are the next steps? Because this is the bare minimum we could have done.
So next step, the next step is that we will be going more intense into this. Your companies like this would bring in a lot of other options, artificial intelligence, even robotics has started, that the teacher would be not required like this in all the classes, and robotics can also play that role. So I agree that physical universities will not go away. I agree that there would be a blended kind of thing and all that, but everything will coexist. So latest technology, I mean, I say generally India is living in 21st century also in 20th century, also in 19th century. What he mentioned, that if you go to the remote areas, you will find 18th century also maybe. So India is such a huge country that everything exists here. So there is a scope for everything. So nobody should feel threatened about it. But it is better for those people who can migrate to newer and newer opportunities. That gives excitement to the youth, as you mentioned, that they love technology and they really like anything new that is coming up. I'm of the generation that we started from blackboard, then green board, then whiteboard, then LCD projector, and then now we see this thing which is there. All those things are of the past now. What we were doing, वो transparency बना के हम लोग इतना बड़ा stock था हमारे पास हर चीज का, वो अब उसकी कोई जरूरत ही नहीं. It has become obsolete. So we have to migrate. और मुझे याद है, I was a student of Shriram College of Commerce. One of the teachers used to bring notes. वो पता नहीं कितने साल पुराने notes थे उसके लिए. I will not take the name of the teacher. But once you used to prepare notes, it used to be useful for next 20 years maybe. Now it is not useful even for the next class. If you speak on the same topic, there is so much of information which gets onto the internet that when you start searching again, you find, oh, so many new things have come. So the pace of creation of knowledge is so fast that you have to adapt to all the new things which would be showing up, Internet of Things and so on and so forth. Engagement level of the students to be tracked. I mean, there are n number of things which you can't even imagine will be provided by service providers, and you will be tempted to go for it because they will claim that this will be the game changer, this will be create a value proposition, and whatever words companies would bring in front of you, you will have to go in for those things. And the time is like that only. The youth likes these newer and newer things. And
absolutely.
If you don't adopt it, they will see on their, and they will ask you, have you seen this? Would you like to consider this? So if it starts coming in from the stakeholders, you can't say no.
Absolutely. So I think very valid points on, I think before we even try to do anything new, what most of the institutions should be looking at is that what we did in the last few months was a quick reaction to it. Can we be more scientific about our online classes? Can we be more scientific about our assessments, the way we are conducting? So I think the first step before even we do anything new should be, can we look back, learn from what we didn't do right in the way online classes or online assessments were done, and do it better this time. And that's one. And that makes me go to the next point in our discussion. Let's leave aside academic excellence, because there is so much more value to a way interactions happen, learning happens when there is a group, other than just the instructional part, obviously. Let's talk about operational excellence. And this is my personal belief all the time, that education institutions should look at technology for everything that is non-teaching, non-learning, because that is the way institutions can be more affordable. They can bring down the cost, they can keep a check on inflation, and they can bring in more transparency and more flexibility and focus on the reason for which an institution exists, which is teaching, learning, research. So quickly going to Dr. Satyanarayana ji and his thoughts on what are your thoughts on adopting technology for operational excellence, whether it is HR, finance, physical operations, hostels, canteens, so many different things that exist. And there are crores of rupees that are being spent every year on.
I think you have hit the nail on the head. I mean, costs are becoming exorbitant, and India cannot, afford to call student as a consumer. It has to be, and it will be a service whether we like it or not. I mean, when 500 million children have, yes, we will always have a few million who can afford anything, because we also know 5 million people spend $15 billion across the globe. Why not they spend it in India? So we could have value and additional cost that will exist, that will grow, and there is an opportunity. But when we are located in a state like Orissa, I don't see that it is only going to be those $15 billion students, but others also come. So without technology, as you write, every aspect of it, they have to be seamlessly integrated and seamlessly, linked to even do, as you mentioned earlier, analytics and way of costing, so that I can cost per student, cost per activity is reduced to the bare minimum. Therefore, bring in more value, optimize utilization, and overall, reduced cost, but higher efficiency. So therefore, again, to a multiple active, even the complaints agencies say we have to do R&D. We have to support student for, say, extracurricular, co-curricular activity. So see, even all these funds are coming. So if we cannot leverage HR, R&D, finance, student activities, all of them together, and see that how do we seamlessly blend them as much as they can be independent verticals of even P&L. Most of their operationalization should have a system and design thinking overview to leverage them in an integrated way to optimize the cost. And but for technology, I would believe it will be humanly impossible to intuitively connect everything, assess values, and therefore also in future to know how do I modularly bring in more things into it. So as you said, it's very, very critical, and therefore having appropriate technology, and of course leveraging experience to build them into as a seamless process with some system and design thinking. So it's very critical. We need to have technology and support, and that is where not everybody can do it. They will not have the bandwidth. So then technology companies have a huge role to play. So they can say that, see, what is the ROI they bring in? Even if I'm doing, say giving education at 1/50th of my cost, if what number can I have so that I would still have an ROI? or at least sustainability. Even if I'm not because I mean norm says we have to be a charitable institution, and most of them will have to, if they comply by all the norms, but they still need to be sustainable. And therefore, without technology, and again advanced technology, it's going to be very difficult to become viable. Otherwise, again, we'll all be undercutting costs, undermining processes, and then we will never, it is equitability has already happened. We need to now move towards excellence for quality. The education has to be a key enabler in the society because it's aspirational, and that excellence can only come when we leverage technology to do all this additional support mechanism in a seamless way.
Got it. Thank you so much. And with that, quick question to Jyotishman ji. I think we talked. Professor Satyanarayana ji mentioned the term PNL, and I have always believed that the academic excellence should be dealt like an academic institution with academic research. No talk about money. No talk about But while there should be another side to an institution. Which talks about what is my cost per student, what is my gross margins, how can I maximize the gross margin so that I have the capability to invest, because I see so many institutions who are so poorly managed that they are not able to invest in good technologies. There were institutions I know that who are not able to even get a good system for online classes just because they have not managed the finances properly. And not that they have any wrong intentions, but just they just don't know where they are, what are the loopholes in the system. A simple example, like for a very premium top university in the Delhi NCR region, we're working on resource utilization analytics for them, saying that, okay, what is your average usage of the physical classrooms? Do you really need new classrooms? Or look, you can actually increase your intake because you have so much of your physical infrastructure which is getting unutilized, or the amount of money you have invested in a, let's say, laboratory or an incubator. What is the ROI on that incubator? Has even a single good company come out of that incubator? So setting up the right metrics, driving that, and making sure, like in the business ways we call unit metrics, is healthy, and you're continuously improving. And especially from your perspective, because you are more on the administrative side as well of the institution, how do you see technology helping improve the unit metrics at institutions?
See, for a self-funded private university, it's always a big dilemma to only admit the students who can afford and teach them, or admit only the students who can actually deserve to get that seat. Somewhere you're always caught. You have to find a balance, because yes, from the regulation point of view, there is absolutely no problem with the government. But in terms of funding also, there is no support from the government. So if it is not funded by a third party or some NGO, it is entirely self-sufficient. You just need enough money at least to pay your bills, have some for contingency. Banks will not give you any waiver just because you are for not for profit. Banks are still for profit. So banks will still charge you 12%. They don't care. So no vendor will give you anything. And the worst part is GST. We pay GST, but we don't take GST. So we get no input. So actually our costs are even rising after GST. So these are nuances only people in the industry understand. See, you don't have to pay GST. He said, that's not the great part. I would have preferred paying GST. So the issue is now you have to make it more lean. 6th pay commission was excellent. Now we have to do 7th pay commission. Excellent. There is no waiver on even electricity bills just because you're educational. So input cost has gone up. Now you have to find the leanest model possible.
Yeah.
I studied in Delhi University, which was the most famous, but the most bureaucratic university in this country. Paying fees was a 3-hour job. They made it feel like you are doing a favor by collecting the fees. So those kind of nuances you cannot have in a private university right now. The students come only to learn. Let them spend 99% of the time for learning, not for running around getting a migration certificate, getting a bona fide certificate. Let's move everything to an app. So that is one point of view of saving the students' time. If you save the students' time, you also save in terms of number of people you're going to be using your offices. I don't have to have 10 people helping the students. I save money. So we have to work on this most leanest organizations in terms of running universities. In terms of teaching faculty, yes, there is very clear-cut mandate from UGC as to the norms needs to be mandated. That is fine. But other than that, where not required, we have to transfer that work to technology. Otherwise, over a long period of time, the non-academic HR bill is going to be extremely huge. And that is a huge cost cutting we can do. Our university, we're taking huge steps to trim it as much as possible. Secondly, yes, it's not a question of profitability per se, it's a question of viability. We have to see each and every program. Some programs are viable, some programs are not viable. So in cases, yes, when we started moving, I don't have a automated metrics as you mentioned, but we do a lot of this math on a yearly basis that some programs, yes, are actually bleeding. So what happens, the programs that the students want, we cannot fund the labs. We cannot expand the softwares needed for that because some programs would be bleeding. So that is a balance that you have to do it from time to time. So ERP for organization, I would say, is critical. If all universities do not move to a lean model, our input costs are going to only shoot up in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's not fair to pass on the entire cost to the student, because most students are actually studying from the parents' hard-earned money or taking a loan, and the placement packages are not going to be in line with the input cost increase. So lean organizations, the most innovative universities will also have to be the most lean organizations. Only then they will have money left to expand for academic excellence. So I would say this is a critical function. We do not have 10 people as peons. We cannot have 100 people in the offices. It's not going to be possible.
So
It's not going to be financially viable.
Absolutely, and thanks for making that point. I think while we will continue to debate on digital versus non-digital learning teaching processes, there is an amazing opportunity right away in front of the institutions to leverage technology for everything that is non-teaching, non-learning, so that more efficiency, cost cutting, and can come. And that brings me to the next question to Professor Ajay Kumar Singh ji. I think India didn't really face much of this issue, but soon we will, because if you see, US is in a huge student debt crisis. Most of the students, huge loans. And now if you see, most of the politicians are there talking about we should give a waiver. Will the new president coming in waive off the debts? And so much there. And I think luckily in India, we save money for marriage and education of our children. So most of the parents end up paying for the fees. But we are not far away where, with so many student financing companies now, that it will become so easy and one of the things that was keeping a lot of parents away from loans was also the difficulty with which you get student loans. But now with private organizations coming in, NBFCs coming in, the student loans are going to be easy. Students are, and I think that's not, which is getting a loan and the student paying it off is amazing. Opportunity to get education and financial support is amazing. But at the same time, institutions have a responsibility to keep a check on the costs. While institutions have no control on their cost from the market perspective, if the construction is going up, you have no control. If the cost of furniture is going up, there's no control. If the new paying commission is coming, you have no control. But you have is on how do you manage with that. And where I have seen personally, for example, at Skolpol, we have seen so many universities where we've been able to cut down cost in lakhs of rupees in canteens, in transportation, in resource utilization. What are the areas at Sri Sri University you think would be some of the opportunities that you would be looking at? Okay, now that I'm already in that mode of digital transformation because of the COVID, what are the areas? Let me be done with it. And it's like in Hindi, now that you mentioned it, we say ki behti ganga mein haath dhona, right? So now that digital transformation ho raha hai, to bahut sare institutions are thinking, let's be done with it. Let's go. These things also done in one go, so that I don't have to keep changing the behavior of my people. Now, when faculty comes, these are the new norms. When the administrator comes, these are the new norms. So what are those areas you think institutions should be looking at automation?
Before automation, I would say that process reengineering, what in business we call business process reengineering. So we should not directly go for automation. We should first see whether what we are doing is actually required or not. Is it adding any value or not? If in the DigiLocker, you can check the mark sheet of the student, he submits you why you need actually the hard copy of the degree to be certified. Government realized sometimes back that there is no need of a gazetted officer signing on that. There's huge problem for the students finding gazetted officer who certifies that. So that was realized some time back. And fees, let me tell, Mr. Datta mentioned about University of Delhi, that fees was, so when I was chairman of a committee to finalize the payment gateway, so we kept a model that we will take up cost of the bank for each item. Whichever bank will give the lowest, we will pick take that price for that particular item, and then we will say that this is the cost that you can charge, and whosoever will agree on the lowest one, we will give it to that. So ICICI Bank gave nil to almost all of them except one item. The SDFC Bank gave nil to that item, and the rest all were priced and all that. So finally, the list which was made, that zero cost for the students to pay when they have to deposit the fees in terms of payment gateway. And we said, are you ready to work on zero cost on this? They said, no, if we don't take it, then SDFC will take it. So finally, now Dattaji in University of Delhi, a student has to pay online the fees without having any charge, whatever mode they go for, debit card, credit card, or whatever card they use, it is at zero cost. So a good news for you that University of Delhi has also moved from that syndrome that you used to take so much of time standing in the queue for paying the fees. And it is important that every aspect of the university, ERP word has been mentioned. So before ERP, the business process reengineering, in the education context, educational process reengineering, obliteration of all those processes which are not required, which do not add any value to the teaching learning process or any other thing that we are looking for. We need not do that. We have been doing so many things from years just because we have been doing it. But now it is not the time to, it is time to rethink. So we at Sri Sri University, every day we are meeting. Today also yesterday it was 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. actually. We were talking about how these processes can be, considered, what are the good things, bad things and all that, what needs to be left, what new things have to be brought and all that. So there is a very deep, introspection which is going on in Sri Sri University to bring it to the next level, and which is more what you said, student experience, how campus experience and all those things were there in your, so all these things we are discussing how to bring it on the table for that. So it is like seamless kind of environment at every place. So I don't see any area which can be devoid of technology in the future. And ERP is supposed to be there, but the same processes, if you put it, just automate them, then the mess still remains. So you are, processing mess at a faster pace.
Absolutely.
You're processing mess at a faster pace. So you need to see whether you are doing the right things or not. If not, change the way you are doing things and then automate them.
So I think that's so first of all, quickly welcome Meghdut. I think you got stuck somewhere. We'll quickly come to you. But a very valid point which Professor Ajay Kumar Singh ji brought in, which we have seen normally, and I think that's a good takeaway for all the participants, that we have seen most of the institutions actually, rather than adopting the best practices that come with the technology, they rather want to go backward. So they take a software and they say, no, I don't do it this way. You make this in my way, in this way, right? And most of the time what you do is you take a system, and at the end of the day, a lot of the players would end up accepting to it because they also have to run their shops. So they want the money, they need the institution to pay them. So they will end up, doing whatever changes. But like you rightly said, what we were doing wrong at a smaller scale, with technology, we start doing it at a bigger scale now. So if there was a wrong process being adopted by one department, now every department will follow that wrong process because we did that mistake. So that, I think, is a big takeaway, that when institutions are adopting technology, it is important to also change their, the processes and adopt the best practices, be best streamlined also with the general practices across the country, so that when the new innovations are coming, because you will be left behind if you do not have the best practices adopted, because the new technologies will be built on top of best practices, not on the specific practices of an institution. And quickly now going to you, Meghdut, I have a important question for you. While institutions are adopting technology, we have seen that a lot of institutions have very quickly, just taken solutions that were either available freely, a majority of institutions went for whatever was, or there was something locally available at a cheaper cost. But one thing that most institutions have overlooked while taking technology is the cybersecurity part. There are extremely loose contracts which do not enforce privacy policies on the use of the data by the service providers. Their systems are not robust enough to keep the data safe, and with examinations and other processes going online, it's a very risky position that we are in. Because imagine, fake degrees being issued on a university's name with all the right credentials, or academics, where results are being published is happening in a wrong way. How do you take care of cybersecurity issues going forward, and what are the things you are doing to make sure this is an important parameter while adopting technology?
Thanks so much for that great question, Hemant. Hope everyone on this panel is doing well and safe. I'm Meghdut, tuning in from Calcutta today. And I think one of the things that we did differently for this, I guess, is the fact that most of our IT infrastructure is maintained in-house. So even before the lockdown, most of the processes that we follow, be it the exams, all of that, the examination systems, the online classes, we had infrastructure built in-house. I actually run a 30-member IT team, which directly works with me on creating, CRMs, MISs, LMS systems, and we've been doing that for a long time. In fact, we used to work with external vendors at some point as well. We used to have Moodle, which was used internally for a long time. Then we had switched to Blackboard and all of that. But being an educational group the size that we are currently, with almost 100,000 students, we had to at some point, put our foot on the ground and say, you know what, we need to build these things. The whole Atmanirbhar thing that we've been talking about for the longest time, we decided to go Atmanirbhar a long time ago. Now, was the execution flawless? It wasn't. I will not kid you on that. I will not try to say something that is not true. But at the same time, I think the fact that we decided to do it on our own and we learned from our mistakes, we've been ahead of the curve. That's why. And the initial times, I think the first couple of months of lockdown were difficult for us, not because of technology issues, but more from the adoption issues. And I think it's a problem. If you look at a university or a college as a microcosm of society, you'll realize it's very similar, right? So the same thing, it's not the same thing that you will go create toilets for people and then expect them to actually use those toilets. So like Swachh Bharat's, success metrics are not dependent on the number of toilets made. It's actually the number of toilets that are being used. In the same way, at the end of the day, technology is only an enabler, right? You can only create that many number of technological interventions within your particular institution or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, that technology also needs to be used. And for that, the first movers here have to be the professors. Now, I will take your question and I'll turn it on its head and I say that cybersecurity comes a lot later. How do you convince teachers who've been teaching a particular way for the last 10, 20, 30 years, and we know that teachers have massive egos. Like I have no, I'm not going to sugarcoat my words here. I know because I work with 5,000 teachers day in and day out. I know teachers and I have a lot of respect for them because we come from a country like India where the Guru Shishya model of education was started, and we have that entire hierarchy of teachers to students, and all of that is good and great, but it is still a big impediment for progress. If you put progress as your metric, where you want more adopters to technology, because these are people who've never used technology before in that particular way and to that level. And I think one of our biggest challenges at Techno India was making sure that when we were making goal sheets for teachers to make sure that they adopted technology, and we created like this sort of 100 percentage points to make sure that they were doing that many number of classes and all of that, there was a lot of resistance from the teachers because they just felt that if they were not able to do it, then maybe their jobs were at stake. One of my jobs, I think at that point, was to come in and say, hey, your jobs are not at stake. Don't worry about it. And honestly, till this date, we are, 22nd March, I think the lockdown started. We are December 2018. Not a single person's salaries were deducted, or we did not kick people out of our education institutions purely for the fact that they were there with us all of this time. They have been there, so we have to be there with them when the need of the hour is there. So it was a challenging time. Cybersecurity comes later. Yes, we've now figured all of it. We've made some mistakes. We've learned from them, and I think tomorrow is going to be better. But in terms of adoption, I guess that was the biggest challenge, and we've thankfully been able to live past it. And tomorrow is going to be better. Let's see what happens.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. So I think, the question still, one of the key things that then probably I'll also touch upon and add on to what Meghdut said, that I think there is a big gap in the way we evaluate technology when we are taking these decisions. Most of the time, the decisions are being made on a checklist. It says, these are the 30 modules I want, and there is a IT leader sitting and making a tick, and he says, oh, all 30 are being met. There is no insights into the user experience of what these technologies offer. For example, most of the institutions were caught in the wrong place with this COVID pandemic, because none of their technologies were mobile friendly. And as students went to their hometowns, they didn't have devices, or they didn't have that good internet connections to, or Wi-Fi to use their laptops or desktops, or there was just one laptop in family, and there were 3 children who had to work, and everybody was caught there, and there was hardly much they could have done so quickly. So that brings me to the next very important question, where I would want all the panelists to share their views. Forget functionalities, forget the number of modules. That's a very archaic way of looking at technology. According to you, what are the areas you would want to evaluate technology when you are taking a decision, and something which the other participants can keep in mind while they are making the decision? And I'll just quickly share, at least from my experience of working in this space for the last 7 years, and I have worked with education groups for a few more years before that. I think there are 3 most important things to me. One is user experience. Is it the most intuitive or natural way technology can do its job? It's not important to just do something. It's important to do it in the most intuitive and friendly way. Second, mobility. I think mobility is non-negotiable going forward. Everything has to be there, not just as an old website, which is a mobile version of a website, but something which is a mobile first experience. And third, like Professor Ajay Kumar Singh ji mentioned, things are moving at so fast speed. Your technology provider has to continuously upgrade and update the system it cannot be a one time. And that's why I think my request to all the participants, my panelists here, is institutions should stop buying technology as one time software. We are in the world of software as a service. If you are taking a decision to take something, it has to be software as a service, so that you can make the partner who's providing you technology accountable and make sure that they are upgrading the system. Otherwise, you can quickly get out of them and get to a better solution. Over to Professor Satyanarayana ji, and then maybe Jyotishman ji, Professor Ajay Kumar Singh ji, and Meghdut, your final comments on the framework to take a decision on what is a good technology, what is not.
I think you've said all the answers yourself already, even before we could start. But you see, the whole education is now, we all know it's supposed to be student-centric, 21st century education. And the student-centric education has to be, again, the experience of the student. I mean, because we are no more interested in education, but we are interested in learning, and we have to create the joy of learning. And the joy of learning has to lead to the student to actually understand and be excited to be able to do critical thinking, creative thinking, analytical thinking, because again, it is no more unidimensional, it's multidimensional, multidisciplinary. So therefore, in this context, it simply goes without saying that the experience, and again, the key stakeholders are finally the student, the teacher, and the administrative staff who are going to enable it. And therefore, everyone has to have a experience that it is making their life simpler and easier. And again, the whole education, therefore, that's, as you already mentioned, their experience is very critical, that they have to feel that, see, I can actually carry on with my job without worrying too much. Just like as we said in the very beginning, Mr. Dutt and Professor Singh mentioned about the fee payment. So everything, I mean, whether it has to happen seamlessly, and anyway, education anytime, any place, anywhere. I mean, just like the ubiquitous computing, education is also has to become ubiquitously available to the student. And that, again, mobility. You have, therefore, that's why I said, in a way, you've already mentioned. So we want it to be so. And finally, that makes it more flexible. The flexibility gives, I mean, a relaxed state of mind to learn. I mean, there is no more stress of learning and on undue competition issues, because as we said, only then the education will be truly learned. As we said, we don't want information is anyway available, dime it and everywhere. So therefore, it has to give that experience, whether it is a faculty, whether it is a staff, whether it is administrator, they should be able to, I mean, realize that it is an enabler for me and not something which is disrupting my process, or I mean discrediting or disenfranchising me. So that is the first requirement. And that again, the flexibility also is very critical, because the stress is so much. If we could do from anytime, anywhere, adjusting, and that's again a great activity. And above all, it has to have value. And all this seamlessly have, if they're integrated, I have, you mentioned in the very beginning, I am very sure I need, the biggest problem in our education is our ability to assess. See, we are still assessing like what we were doing for clerks in 18,000 EAD. But then we are in 21st century, and as we said in the beginning, we are looking at analytical skills, personal, interpersonal. We are looking at so many aspects, and all this matrices assessment from every activity has to happen. And that is where the ability to do the analytics. I mean, the moment in everything, at every level, at every stage of my, even the very engagement, teaching is the next, it should be able to give me information about the efficiency or the efficacy of the process. So therefore, the tool has to, as you really rightly mentioned, give an experience to everybody, and everybody should feel it's an enabler. Because you could have the best tool, and if you cannot adapt it, I mean, it's useless. And then the mobility is needed, because again, above all, we are very clear, knowledge life cycles are reducing very fast. Product life cycles are even reducing faster, and therefore it cannot be a one-off tool, and it has to be, therefore the mobility is both for the product and the process, and it has to be a continuous engagement and improvement. So it can only happen when it is a lifelong engagement in a way. I mean, whoever, the vendor, the partner, the institution, all of us are learning on the job, enabling on the job, and still having a great experience. So therefore, as you rightly mentioned, along with the ability to bring in inferences at every stage, even to do dynamic on the move or on the fly correction, to even upgrade my process, is something had to be added besides the 3 points you said. But without that, I think it's impossible for us, and especially because knowledge is truly changing very fast, and we are in the business of knowledge, not just advocacy, but knowledge creation, comprehension, dissemination, and advocacy. And therefore, if it cannot happen, I mean, we cannot, there is, when the whole world is today linked, and therefore we'll be nowhere. And India is going to be looked both because we have the largest number of students. We will be major technology enabler in multiple domains. And so if this technology with all these 3 or 4 features doesn't come in, I think we can as well close shop. So it's a mandatory requirement to look at them. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jyotishmanji, your framework on evaluating technology, whether it is inbuilt or somebody from outside, what are the key parameters in evaluating technology?
See, to be honest with you, when we started our ERP, it was only for organizational needs and to store notes so that students did not have to go through the whole process of writing notes and access them through emails. So that was all we had. We had never thought the day would come, the university would shut down and the ERP would become a university. Now we would need a software that enables us to capture leads, make telecalls, do admissions, and even do a convocation online, which I think people are working on, but that day is yet to come. But the issue is there are some issues that crop up. But thing is that university, as I mentioned, more than automating a software, their flow has to be automated. A software is nothing but a reflection of the thought process or the automated flow. But the flows keep changing in a university. Every university has a different class of students, different ethnic background of students, different problems. So they have different requirements. So every software vendor has to be very open about that. Some kind of an open architecture has to be adopted. Even if the best practices that is very good in an A+ institute may not work in another institute. Secondly, we have a workflow. For example, our students will start at 9 and will end at 11. Excellent. There was some problem. There was a bund and 200 students could not make it at 9. The software doesn't enable a second exam to happen parallelly from 9:30. But in a brick and mortar situation, it is allowed. So these flexibilities are very, very important, which most softwares are not giving. Secondly, the biggest problem why we are very reluctant to have a third-party software is support. Software companies are very professional. Most are American PE backed. Great. 5 o'clock after Friday, they don't pick calls. Universities don't operate like that. We operate on a Sunday. We may decide to have examinations on Sunday, but the call center is supported by some call center in America and doesn't operate on a Sunday. So what do we do? Yeah, software cannot tell us how we operate. So we are very reluctant even now to go for a lot of third-party software. This is a practical problem that's happened to us.
We need to work with you to change your opinions.
Students have already, there was a bug, whatever, there will be bugs. No software is entirely 100% free. It is acceptable to have a bug. On a Friday evening, I have a bug and I could only solve it on Monday. 25 students could not be registered because of the bug, because we had taken some third-party software. These are the problems. So there is an issue. And most importantly, India is going from 4G to 5G on newspapers and scams. In most places in Northeast, there is no 2G. So you have to have a light software, very, very light software, nothing fancy. We do not want fancy graphics. We do not want fancy animations. It needs to work on a mobile phone. Most importantly, no one, we check 94-95% of our students are sitting for the exam even from a mobile phone. Everything has to operate like a very, very light app. If that is possible, yes, a lot of changes would happen. Otherwise, the flow of change is not going to happen fast. But right now, we are very clear. In the next 6 months, we want to replicate the university in a software. Everything.
Absolutely. So I think amazing points. You want the technology to be more flexible and agile, because like in the real world, it needs to be more humanly, that we can quickly make changes and adopt. That's one, I think, what I heard. Second, I think the technology needs to be better supported. So it's not just providing a software, and I think that will change also with more and more Indian technology companies coming in, because for the US and other companies, India is just a extension. It's not a core market.
I'm talking about the Indian company, which is almost becoming unicorn, but supported by American funds. I'm talking about the Indian company based in Bangalore.
I will tell you something that, so for example, on our product, we are integrating IVR to make a lot of processes, being done on the phone calls. And we realized one of the Indian companies, which is not providing an India number in India, and because all what they're focusing is on the US number. So and there are TRI guidelines on. So absolutely. So I think humanliness, agility, and support, and finally, like you mentioned, it needs to be light. It needs to have the ability to be adopted over a phone in remote of the places as well. Quickly going to Professor Ajay Kumar Singh ji, some of the important aspects you think technology needs to be evaluated on before a decision is taken on, yes, this is something we need to start with.
I think what Mr. Datta mentioned just now is very important. Apart from whatever feature by feature analysis you do of different ERP service providers, software as a service, and all that, you can have a map wherein you tick mark, this one is the best, and so on and so forth, and you go ahead with that. And then on a Friday, you call them in the evening, and they don't provide you service. Even on a Monday, if they promise and they don't provide, what do you do with that? So you are tied up with them. That is the most painful experience for any organization, for that matter. So the reputation of सर्विस प्रोवाइडर्स इन दिस फील्ड इज नॉट वेरी गुड, नॉट वेरी गुड. हम प्रिंटिंग प्रेस वालों को बोलते थे पहले, जो है प्रिंटिंग प्रेस वाले ने जो डेट दी है वो उस डेट को दे देगा, ये बड़ा मुश्किल है. वो कह दे ट्रक पे लोड हो गया, तो उससे पूछो कि ड्राइवर का फोन नंबर दे दो और वो चालान की कॉपी जरा भेज दो, जो है तो पता चलता है अभी तक लोड नहीं हुआ वो, जो है. सो कुछ बिजनेसेस ऐसे होते थे जिन पे हमें पता होता था कि भाई ये अगर बोल रहे हैं आज मिल जाएगा, या जो भी उन्होंने डेडलाइन दी, वो यू हैव टू वेरी पर्टिकुलर अबाउट मॉनिटरिंग दैट. और यहाँ तो टेक्नोलॉजी का सवाल है. वो तो प्रिंटिंग प्रेस हुआ करती थी, जो है वो कई सारे ऐसे बिजनेसेस थे जिसमें हमारा एक्सपीरियंस है कि वो कभी भी अपनी डेडलाइन को मीट नहीं करते थे. Here the exam is to be conducted on a particular date. You can't play with that. You can't play with that. So the kind of commitment that is required from software people is missing. That is my experience as well in Shri Shri University, and all the people here, those who have dealt with those companies, our experience is the same. So software companies have to come up to that standard. We talk of student experience, campus experience, and all other experiences we were talking about, employee experience, employee engagement, and all those terms were there, which in the PPT, when we hear for the first time, so rosy picture is shown to us. And when we tie up with them, and then we realize what Datta Sahab was just talking about, what happens to that. So maybe that there should be a review mechanism which is there at a central level somewhere. जैसे वैसे तो होता है ना, उसमें आता है कि review 3.5, 3.7 and all that. I don't know what is happening in this, कि लोगों को पता चले कितनी जगह इन्होंने परेशान किया लोगों को जो है, ताकि वो अगली बार फिर वो बिजनेस में ही ना रहे अगर ऐसा करें तो। देयर शुड बी सम सिस्टम लाइक दैट, यू नो।
So two things. I think what you mentioned. One was the specific focus on support, not just the software, and the ability to be timely available to the institution is very important when you are evaluating. And I think the second thing which you rightly mentioned is that how do you get to know transparently about what technology has worked out well, what has not, and I think that's where.
Third thing also I would like to mention, when you show you have this, tick, 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 but we want that in a very different way. We want to see, you know, when I type the roll number or enrollment number of a student, I want to know about everything. And when we talk to the service provider, they say, we have this, but we don't have this. So if you ask them how much time you will take to do this, then you get a timeline which is not acceptable to you.
Right.
So that is another dimension, that what is available straitjacket, that is something which they can provide to you. उसको भी कहते हैं, उसमें भी कुछ करना पड़ता है, उसमें भी बहुत time लगता है. Like if I ask you how much is the time that when the order is given of an ERP and how much time it should take that it is for all the modules that you are saying is implemented, how much do you think? I'm asking you a question.
Yeah, so it will depend on just two things. I have a very clear, straightforward answer. So we have gone live in universities in 2 weeks also, and there are institutions where it took us 6 to 7 months also to go live. It totally depends on two things, because see, I totally agree with you on the points that you mentioned, but then there is another side to it also, which is one, the readiness of the institutions with the right set of data. If the data is coming in scanned copies of physical papers, it's very difficult to adopt. Second thing, it also is dependent on the quality of the IT team an institution has. I think we are talking about exceptional institutions here, but majority of the institutions have not invested in good IT teams. You know, there is some professor who was teaching computer science, and that's the reason why he has been made the head of the IT department. I'm not saying, so there would be exception. There will be some professors who are amazing. Like I work with the, for example, let's say MIT Academy of Engineering in Pune, and the person who's leading is a professor and amazing. And like D.Y. Patil Pune, where we work, the professor of computer science is an amazing experience, but there have been most of the time not the right experiences. And third thing, I think, which is important, and now that we are talking very openly, we need to talk. Institutions have not invested in technology. When the time comes to write the check, they want to go for the lowest check, and then what you get for peanuts is peanuts. And that's the point we have always maintained, that in the past we would have, at least the number of institutions we work with, we would have at least said no to double that number of institutions, because they were not ready to pay. And if we do not invest in the right resources, same issues will keep coming back to you. You will ask me for a feature, I will not have that feature because I don't have money to invest, because I don't have money. So I think we have taken an amazing start to it with COVID, where institutions have finally opened up that yes, we are ready to invest in technology. And with this, what's happening, and I'll one more point, I think this is something, because this is a space I'm very passionate about. I started building this when nobody was keen on this. I saw that, none of the investors, so we have been fortunate to have an amazing set of investors, like people who started, the person who started Mindtree to others in building what we are building. I think one of the things is also that what happens is when market responds, entrepreneurs also get motivated to build better solutions. And that I'm sure, like for example, Meghdut is an entrepreneur himself. When market responds, when we see institutions adopting and reading, because there were times when we will go and say collaboration and workflow, they'll say nahi, wo sab nahi chahiye, finance, HR, or ye karke do, bas itna teen chahiye, right? And that's where you get demotivated and say there's no point investing in better technology. Or I know several institutions last year telling me mobile app nahi chahiye, web ka batao kitna milega. And so that is where I think now, as a larger ecosystem, including institutions, including the tech companies, we have, I think, had an amazing start in this year with unfortunately we needed a pandemic to push us for that. But I think, we will have different opinions if we speak sometime at the same time next year, because institutions would have invested appropriately. Better technology companies would have come. there would be better coordination between the two. So definitely, and I think we need to work together to change your opinions, which probably I'll connect offline. Quickly to you, Meghdut, your thoughts, frameworks to make the right technology decisions, and then we have a last closing remarks and wrap up.
Sure. Firstly, I loved Mr. Datta's point on the technology enablement, because I can, and it hurts so bad, right? It hit the spot because we have all these campuses in Jharkhand. We have campuses in the northeast, Shillong, Meghalaya, then in Jharkhand, in random places, right? In Chaibasa, Dumka, Silli, places that you've never heard the names of. So, I mean, doing a technology rollout for a campus in Calcutta is very, very different from doing a technology rollout in one of those places. And on top of that, you'd have the son of a truck driver or the son of a gardener, whoever's studying at that school. For them, the accessibility to that technology is just not there. Right. So thanks so much for raising that point. But I want to maybe draw a parallel with another completely different way of, I mean, see, at the end of the day, technology is an enabler. And Hemant, you will know better than anybody else that to your investor, the same way that, I mean, whatever time I've spent in the Valley or in Israel, I've realized that investors particularly don't care about what technology you use. What they care about is itna critical mass pahunchega ki nahi. They care about what the experience of the end user is. उसमें ML डालोगे कि AI डालोगे, that's your developer's problem. उसको क्या जाते हैं? उसको तो पैसा देना है. They'll have to at the end of the day get the return on their investment. And if it works for the person at the end of the road, I mean, if only, I say this with the equal amounts of sadness and hope that we can finally make this work. But if only booking tickets on the IRCTC website was as easy as ordering food on Swiggy or Zomato, then the whole way that transportation, for example, in this country works would have been different. Not saying innovation hasn't happened in the same way, but it should have happened in a way that, you know, when we look at, you know, politics, for example, we look at government, and I don't want to make it into political discussion. What I want to say is only 1% is people's politics. 99% is organizational politics. If at the end of the day, if a country is, you know, is being run in a particular way, it needs to keep up with the times, and on the end level, there needs to be technological interventions happening at that point as well. I, as the owner of 5 schools in Jharkhand, will not be able to solve the digital divide by myself. There's nothing I can do. What can I do? I mean, maybe there's a solution. I'll get like a bus somewhere and put a bunch of Wi-Fi routers on it and make it go around the city in places which has most amount of population of my students. And then maybe they'll get some access to technology. That's not a sustainable solution. I can't make that happen. But on the other side, if we can figure out a way that using technology, let's say putting it on a helium balloon and putting a bunch of routers and making it available for people around there, something that only the government can do. Organizational politics or organized running of the country should take that into account. Maybe that's the kind of investment. So it's not just a factor of the investment of institutions on technology. It's also a factor of the investment of governments on technology, because without that, no matter how big a private player of education you are, you will never be big enough to solve the entire digital divide. That's where also I think one of the big problems lie. And I hope that tomorrow, maybe 1 year from now, when we have this discussion, hopefully by then we would have all gotten the vaccine. We would have learned all the lessons that we had to learn from this pandemic, and we're not constantly desperately breathing for air every time we go out because we have to wear these stupid masks. But I hope by then we would have solved that problem of organizational policy changes through which access to technology becomes easier for our students, our teachers, and the fact that they don't have to spend so many sleepless nights. We don't have to spend so many sleepless nights trying to get on top of our technological divide anymore. So yeah, that's
absolutely. Thanks, Meghdut. And I think what happens, obviously we all know how market forces work. Whenever there's an opportunity, the market responds to it. And I think there is when we talk specifically about the intersection of education and technology, now that opportunities have come out, the market's going to respond to it. So there will be a lot of good universities. Suddenly, Assam Downtown University goes and takes bold steps and makes a very separate brand for itself, because there's a new opportunity in front of them to leverage tech. So I think in universities will take steps to see how they can leverage this opportunity that has come in terms of education and technology coming together. Players like us who are providing technologies and services to institutions will come up. Players like Jio and others who are providing internet services, mobile networks, or companies will come with, like you rightly mentioned, can there be better solutions to routers or balloons, and so many different things. So I think now that we're talking about technology driven education, a lot is going to happen. This year was more about catching up, finding that balance. While we got shaken up, we were trying to balance ourselves, and now that most of us have gone to that stable position, is when a lot is going to happen. With that, thank you to every respected panelist for joining in and having a very open. I think this was a very candid conversation. We didn't really limit ourselves to the niceties and to talking about our own institution. I'm so happy that I think none of us in this discussion, because normally when we get into this conversation, the conversations only happen around what I did at my institution. And I think we didn't talk at all about it, which is great because we stuck to the topic. With this, quickly, one line from each one of you as a closing remark, one line on anything that you think is important from a topic perspective today. So maybe we'll start with Dr. Satyanarayana.
I think technology is the and the only enabler and a leveler here, as far as is in a disparate country like India, access problems notwithstanding. And therefore, we need to adapt it with an open mind, and a lot of innovation has to come in. But only then we can truly enable, as I said, 500 million coming into education system. Otherwise, I think we are doomed.
Great. Meghdut, your last opening remarks.
I mean, let's focus on building. Let's focus on building the workforce. Let's focus on building, our end students as being more curious, are more critically able to question things happening around them, because technology can only do so much. If you're not able to create individuals at the end of the day who are able to look at patterns in the world that's happening around them and take decisions accordingly so that they can pull this country forward, then what are we doing? No amount of technology is going to help that. It's only going to keep making more and more chances to spread more misinformation, more fake news, more channels of reaching out to people. At the end of the day, the people need to be able to understand. And again, that's the whole point of education, right? It's not just about giving a bunch of facts and figures and statistics. It's about the stories. It's about how you can contribute to your nation's growth and your nation's future. And for that, we need better individuals. So let's not fool ourselves. Technology is not going to take care of that. We have to do that through education, through better resources that we are able to provide to our students.
Perfect. Jyotishmanji, yours.
The digital transformation is a must and it will happen. But I think Hemant, somewhere you realize before that we need a psychological and mental transformation as well. Administrators of universities are still reluctant, and for some right reasons, because all of us have burned the fingers with the wrongest people. So I think the coding is the easy part. You have to also spend a lot of time in transforming the wrong things or the bad experiences that have happened. And one thing I would agree with that, yes, as a university, we cannot afford to have a 30-member or 100-member IT teams, most people. But the IT orientation of each and every member of the whole academy has to change. People are very adaptive in adopting Instagram, Facebook, but they are not equally adapting a new LMS or a new ERP. That mentality has to change. Everyone in bit 10% has to be an IT officer. That is a huge, I would believe, an HR opportunity for companies even like you. How do you transform the mentality of the 600 of my staff to adopt IT? Otherwise, even if I have the best IT administrator in the world, I cannot transform a 600 people who will be adapting what you will be offering at the end of the day. So these are the two things that we would be requiring. Only then the transformation will happen, which is a must and needs to happen.
Yeah, extremely valid point. I'm sorry, before going to Professor Ajay Kumar Singh, one point I have to mention here, which I have observed, is I think technology adoption happens when we solve problems of people. When I go and see where is my faculty struggling, can I give a solution to them? Then, and I have seen there are some universities where there are 5,000, let's say 80 students, and there are, everybody logs in at least twice or thrice on our platform because we were able to solve their problems. While there are also some institutions where I'm working where I may not have even half the users logging in because the institution has yet not adopted the technology in the way where people's problems are solving. So the difference is in, is it a push based adoption or is it a pull based adoption? And pull based would only happen when we actually stick to the pain points of our stakeholders and not just push technology on them. And that's where I have seen personally my greatest implementations versus my not so good the implementations, that are we really sticking to the problems people are facing on daily basis? If I can solve, for a small example, with our LMS, when we solved the attendance problem, that after the Zoom class, auto attendance will be marked on our LMS of Colpol, we suddenly saw a lot more usage of the faculty because they said, hey, I don't need to take attendance. This is great. So I'm going to start scheduling classes on Colpol because attendance mark nahi karna padega. So when we solved that problem, automatically people started adopting. So I think there is a lot more homework for us as technology providers, definitely, to go more and more deeper to the real problems of the people. And at the same time, for institutions also to go beyond the checklist, like we were, I think all of us agreed, we had to go beyond that IT checklist to actual problems. I think final remarks from you, Professor Ajay Kumar Singh ji.
I also subscribe to the fact that there is no alternative. TINA factor, as we call TINA factor, there is no alternative, TINA. So we have to either drive it or somehow figure out, wonder how some people have done, we are not able to do, and all that. So some people will be leaders in adopting it, early adopters, as we say, of any new technology. So it's better to drive it and be in the front line of leaders who are adopting it faster, making it happen, and experiencing both kind of things as we discussed. I would suggest you, Hemant, that you should actually put one person in the campus on the salary or the roles of the university or education institution, that this person will ensure that this is done properly. It should be part of the package, because whatever is the competence of the people, IT people in the university or in the colleges, it is not matching with what you are actually doing unless he has exposure of the same thing.
Yeah.
So he has to figure out, he has to learn, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So
No,
there would be people in any case in the university who would be taking care of that, whether they are full-time in the IT or they are professors, whatever. But any new technology brings its own new nuances and all that. Every software brings all that. So I would suggest that you should dedicate persons. Don't expect the universities or colleges to have people who are excellent in understanding your software and things like that. That should be embedded in the package. Only then probably things would be will roll out faster. And I mean, that's it. There is no other alternative. We have to do it. Everybody has to do it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the areas that we keep discussing internally within the team is that one area where we still think there's so much more to learn is getting technology adopted in institutions. And as a education technology company, we are spending every single day on how best. So for example, there are always going to be challenges around providing support. So just yesterday I was having a chat with one of my key team members and saying, look, we cannot have people all the time available on a phone call. And with with the technology and work from home comes, there are students who are, I remember just few days back, we were migrating one of our partner institutions to the new technology that we have launched. And students started complaining at 1 o'clock in the night. And my team had done that migration at 1 a.m. because they thought nobody would be using, and there was substantial number of students using at 1 a.m. and they started complaining. So we learned that, boss, it's not just good enough. That old days when you say ki 1 baje sab so rahe hain, migrate kar dena, is not going to work, because people are at home. They are working at their own pace and at their own ease. And so we said, we can't have everybody available at that late nights, but can we have better documentation? Can we have better search engines? Like you rightly mentioned, can we have better quality content, which is visually rich for people to quickly get help? May not be from a human, but maybe from the resource that's available. So I think it's day one for us all the time when we talk about adoption. We might be very good at building technology, building apps, but it's always day one when it comes to adoption. And that's a challenge I think companies like us will always continue to have, because the challenge at the end of the day is leaders like you in this panel will always have a positive outlook. But what's more important is that the end user also needs to have that outlook and implement and adopt it. And then only it's a success. So thank you so much again to all of you for joining in, taking out your time. I see there is one question which I can probably which talks about there is an increase in budget for institutions as they adopt technology. However, and institutions are already cash strapped because of late admissions and so many things. How do we So I think quick question quick answer to that, and if anybody has a different answer, happy to have you answer this, is that see, technology is not an immediate, it is going to be immediate in short term a cost to you. But if you adopt it right, if you take the right decisions, then in the medium term, not even long term, it's going to help you cut down a lot of cost. And I think all of us spoke about how substantial cost cutting can be done with the right use of technology. So in the short term, yes, it's a cost we have to take. So again, thanks to everyone. Over to you, Chandan, and thanks to ASMA team for organizing the session.
Thank you so much, Hemant, and thank you so much, lovely speakers over here. So in speakers, you represented the best institutions of the Eastern and the Central India. And thank you so much, audience, for getting stuck. And you really enjoyed. We can see that interaction on the chat box and the Q&As which you are asking from this panelist. So Hemant, in fact, it has been a wonderful journey of almost a 2-month series where we tried to focus and feature on different geographic region of India. We did, just to inform the panelists today, so we have, reached out to all leading institutions of different geography, the Northern India, then the Western India, the Southern India, and today was the concluding ceremony and the last session of DCC, where we invited you all, representation of the Eastern and Central India. And I think the justice to this session has definitely come to an end, and we have talked more about and in depth and a very interesting dialogue on the digital transformation of education. So वो कहते हैं ना कि sir, if you cannot do great things, so let us do small things in a great way. So this is what the learning of today's session we can come to an end. So excellent and wonderful deliberation. In middle of difficulties, as we know that it lies opportunities. So skilling, reskilling, adopting, leveraging technology, collaborations, time managements are the few important tools which we need to adopt in our day-to-day life. Salute to all you dynamic leaders and your commanding leadership in transforming the new age education. So our best wishes to all of you and your team in implementing the NAP, a smooth in a smooth way, and adopting new learning, new age learning in a growth journey. We hope that you all have enjoyed and learned the valuable insights from our top academicians and educators and edtech leaders. We truly appreciate your time with us. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much, Ajay sir, Satnarayanan sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you so much.
And
It was a great experience to be here today. Thank you so much.